They called him the whale, not because of his size, but because of his appetite. Carl Thomas walked into casinos with credit lines that could buy small countries, and he played baccarat the way most people play slot machines, carelessly and recklessly, with stakes that could fund a hospital. On one single night in Atlantic City, he lost $200 million. $200 million. And when the sun came up, he asked for more credit. This is the story of the biggest gambler Las Vegas and Atlantic City ever courted, and how his addiction nearly destroyed the casinos that enabled it. Before Carl Thomas became the cautionary tale of high-stakes gambling, he was a legitimate success story. The American dream wrapped in real estate deals and business acumen. Born in 1946, Carl built an empire the old-fashioned way. He saw opportunities where others saw risk, and he had the guts to bet on himself. By the early 2000s, Carl Thomas owned and operated a real estate development company that stretched across multiple states. Shopping centers, office buildings, residential complexes, the kind of portfolio that generates passive income while you sleep. Conservative estimates put his net worth somewhere north of $2 billion. That's billion with a B. Carl lived the life that comes with that kind of money. Multiple homes, private jets, art collections. He sat on charitable boards, donated to political campaigns, and moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every dollar. Friends described him as intelligent, focused, disciplined. A man who calculated risk and made informed decisions. But there was something else beneath that surface, something Carl himself might not have recognized until it was too late. A need for the rush, for the thrill that business deals could not provide anymore. When you have made your first $100 million, when you have closed deals that would make other men's careers, what is left to prove? What is left to feel? Carl discovered the answer in the early 2000s. Baccarat. It started innocently enough. A business trip to Las Vegas, some downtime after a conference, a colleague suggesting they hit the tables. Carl had gambled before. Casual blackjack, some poker with friends, but he'd never experienced high-stakes baccarat, never felt the electricity of betting $100,000 on a single hand, and he loved it. Not just the winning, though he won plenty in those early sessions. He loved the simplicity, the speed, the binary nature of the game. Banker or player, win or lose. No complicated strategy to master. No bluffing or reading opponents. Just pure chance, dressed up in tuxedos and crystal chandeliers. The casinos noticed him immediately. A billionaire real estate developer with no credit issues, no history of stiffing casinos, and an apparent appetite for action. That's not a customer, that's a whale. And every casino in Vegas and Atlantic City wanted to harpoon him. Carl started getting invitations. Private jet service to and from the casino. Penthouse suites with views that made you forget you were in the desert. Gourmet meals prepared by celebrity chefs. Tickets to sold-out shows. Beautiful hosts whose only job was to make sure Carl Thomas never wanted for anything. And credit. God, the credit lines they extended. 5 million, 10 million, 20 million. Whatever Carl wanted, because the casinos understood something fundamental about whales. You do not make money off them by being cautious. You make money by letting them play until the house edge catches up, and it always catches up. By 2007, Carl Thomas was one of the most sought-after players in the world. Caesars wanted him. MGM wanted him. The Borgata in Atlantic City rolled out the red carpet every time his plane landed. He wasn't just a customer. He was a profit center, a quarterly earnings boost, a story pit bosses would tell for years. But Carl Thomas wasn't gambling for the comps or the attention. He was gambling because he couldn't stop. Because the man who had built a $2 billion empire through calculated risk had found the one game where calculation didn't matter, where discipline and business acumen meant nothing, where the only thing that mattered was the turn of a card. And he was about to learn exactly what that addiction would cost. To understand what happened to Carl Thomas, you need to understand the economics of whale gambling. Casinos do not treat high rollers the way they treat tourists feeding quarters into slot machines. Whales exist in a different ecosystem entirely. The term whale comes from the casino industry's classification system. There are minnows, the casual gamblers who bet $5 or $10 a hand. There are dolphins, mid-level players who might bet a few hundred. And then there are whales, players who bet 5 figures or more per hand and can lose millions in a single session. Statistically, whales represent less than 1% of casino customers, but they generate somewhere between 30 and 50% of total gaming revenue at high-end properties. That ratio makes them the most valuable commodity in the gambling industry. More valuable than slot machines, more valuable than poker tournaments, more valuable than concerts and restaurants and hotel rooms combined. So, casinos compete for whales, the way tech companies compete for genius engineers. They offer whatever it takes to get them in the door and keep them at the tables. For someone like Carl Thomas, that meant a level of service most people cannot imagine. Private jet service was not just offered, it was insisted upon. A Gulfstream would be waiting at whatever airport was convenient, stocked with Carl's preferred drinks and snacks, staffed by crew members trained to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. Upon landing, a limousine would be waiting. Not a town car, a stretch limousine or a Rolls-Royce, whatever Carl preferred. Driven directly to the casino's private entrance, the one celebrities and Saudi princes use, away from the tourists and the crowds. The suite was not just a room, it was a multi-level apartment with square footage that rivaled most American homes. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views, a private pool or hot tub. A grand piano Carl would never play, art worth more than the average person's house. A master bedroom with a bed so large it required custom sheets. And usually, multiple additional bedrooms for friends or family Carl might bring along. Food was never an issue. If Carl wanted Daniel Boulud to prepare a private dinner, the casino made it happen. If he wanted Wolfgang Puck to create a custom menu, they flew him in. Room service meant Michelin star cuisine, delivered at 3 in the morning if that is when Carl got hungry. Entertainment was handled. Front row seats to any show in town. Backstage access if Carl wanted it. Sometimes performers would be brought to the casino specifically for Carl, private concerts for an audience of 1. And then there were the hosts, beautiful, intelligent women whose job description was simple: make Carl Thomas happy. Not in a sexual way, though the implication was always there. Companionship, conversation, someone to laugh at his jokes and make him feel like the most important person in the world. Because when you are betting millions of dollars, you deserve to feel important. But the real perk, the one that mattered more than all the others combined, was credit. Unlimited, unsecured credit that would make any banker's hair stand on end. The way it worked was simple. Carl would arrive at the casino and sign a marker, essentially an IOU, for whatever amount he wanted. 5 million, 10 million, 20 million. The casino would provide him with chips equal to that amount, and Carl would gamble. If he won, he could cash out and pocket the profit. If he lost, he owed the casino the full amount of the marker, payable within a specified time frame, usually 30 to 45 days. The interest rate on these markers was 0. That's right, casinos extended 8-figure lines of credit to gamblers at 0% interest because they did not need to charge interest. The house edge was their interest rate, a guaranteed profit over time. For Carl Thomas, this system was intoxicating. It felt like free money, like an extension of his own wealth that he could access anytime. He was not borrowing, he was just accessing his credit, his buying power. And when you are worth $2 billion, what is 10 million in markers? What is 20 million? It is a rounding error. The casinos understood the psychology perfectly. They knew that unlimited credit, combined with the adrenaline of high-stakes gambling, created a feedback loop that was almost impossible to break. They knew that whales like Carl would keep playing, keep signing markers, keep chasing losses until the numbers became almost incomprehensible. And they did not care. Even if Carl won occasionally, even if he walked away with a $10 million profit now and then, the math was always in the casino's favor. Over time, over hundreds of hours at the tables, the house edge would grind him down. It always did. Carl Thomas was the perfect whale, rich enough to cover his losses, addicted enough to keep coming back, and proud enough to never walk away from the table when he was losing. The casinos loved him for it. They loved him right up until the night he lost $200 million and decided he did not want to pay. Baccarat is the game of kings and fools, and it is almost impossible to tell the difference between them at the table. To understand how Carl Thomas could lose $200 million in a single session, you need to understand baccarat. Not just the rules, but why it attracts the world's biggest gamblers and destroys them with mathematical precision. The game is absurdly simple. Two hands are dealt, one called the player and one called the banker. Each hand receives 2 or 3 cards, depending on a set of predetermined rules. The hand closest to 9 wins. That is it. No decisions to make, no strategy to employ, no skill involved whatsoever. You bet on player, banker, or tie. Banker has a slightly better mathematical probability of winning, so it pays even money minus a 5% commission. Player pays even money. Tie pays 8 to 1, but almost never hits. Most serious baccarat players ignore the tie bet entirely and focus on banker versus player. The house edge on banker is 1.06%. On player, it is 1.24%. Those are some of the lowest house edges in the casino, lower than roulette, lower than most blackjack games, lower than craps except for specific bets. So why does baccarat destroy more fortunes than any other game? Because of bet size and speed. In blackjack, even high-stakes tables usually cap bets at $10,000 or $20,000. In baccarat, there is no cap. If you want to bet $1 million on a single hand, the casino will take that bet. If you want to bet $5 million, they will take that too, assuming you have the credit. And the game moves fast. A baccarat hand takes about 40 seconds from deal to resolution. That means you can play 80 to 90 hands per hour if you are going continuously. Multiply that by bet size, and you can win or lose staggering amounts in a very short time. Carl Thomas typically bet between $300,000 and $1 million per hand, sometimes more when he was chasing losses. At that rate, the swings could be violent. Win 10 hands in a row, and you are up $10 million. Lose 15 of the next 20, and you are down $8 million. The volatility is breathtaking. But here is the insidious part. Because the house edge is so low, you can play for hours and stay relatively even. You will win some, lose some, win some more, lose some more. It feels beatable. It feels like skill matters, like you can predict patterns like the shoe is hot or cold, or due to shift. None of that is true. Every hand of baccarat is independent. The cards do not remember what happened on the previous hand. Pattern recognition is a cognitive illusion. But gamblers do not believe that, especially gamblers like Carl Thomas, who had made billions by recognizing patterns in real estate markets. Carl thought he could beat baccarat. He thought his intelligence, his business instincts, his ability to read situations would give him an edge. And for a while, it seemed like he was right. He won tens of millions. He walked away from weekend sessions, up $20 or $30 million. But the math does not care about winning streaks. The math does not care about intelligence or instinct. Over a long enough timeline, the house edge grinds everyone down to zero. And Carl played long enough. He also fell into every psychological trap the game sets. When he won, he believed it was skill. When he lost, he believed it was bad luck, a temporary variance that would correct itself if he just kept playing. So he never walked away when he was losing. He doubled down, signed more markers, increased his bet size to recover losses faster. The casinos watched this happen in real time and did nothing to stop it. Why would they? Carl was an adult, a billionaire, a sophisticated businessman who understood risk. If he wanted to bet $1 million on the turn of a card, that was his choice. And on one particular night in Atlantic City, Carl Thomas made that choice over and over until he had lost more money than most people will see in 100 lifetimes. The date was sometime in 2011. The casino was the Borgata in Atlantic City. And what happened that night would become the stuff of legend in the gambling world, whispered about in pit boss meetings and high roller lounges for years to come. Carl Thomas arrived at the Borgata on a Thursday evening. He had flown in from wherever his business had taken him that week, landed at the private terminal, and been driven directly to the casino's high roller entrance. The suite was ready, the credit was approved, and the baccarat table was waiting. Carl's credit line at the Borgata was enormous. Estimates vary, but most sources suggest it was somewhere between $100 million and $150 million. The casino had extended that credit because Carl had always paid his markers, always settled his debts. He was a whale, but he was a reliable whale. The session started around 8 p.m. Carl sat down at a private baccarat table, away from the main casino floor, in a room reserved for ultra-high rollers. The minimum bet at his table was $100,000. There was no maximum. The dealers rotated in and out every 20 minutes, standard procedure for high-stakes games. Pit bosses watched from a distance, their eyes flicking between the table and the overhead cameras. Security monitored every card, every chip, every movement. When you are playing for these stakes, everyone is watching. Carl started betting his usual amounts. $300,000, $400,000 per hand. He won some early hands, built up a small profit. The pit bosses relaxed slightly. Maybe this would be a normal session. Win a few million, lose a few million, end up roughly even. But around midnight, Carl's luck shifted. He started losing. Not catastrophically at first, just a slow bleed. Lose 2 hands, win 1, lose 3 more, win 1. The chips started moving from his side of the table to the dealer's rack. And Carl did exactly what addicted gamblers do when they start losing. He increased his bets. $500,000 per hand became $700,000. 700 became $1 million. He was trying to get even, trying to win back his losses in a few big hands rather than grinding it out slowly. The pit bosses saw what was happening and made a decision. They could have cut Carl off, told him he had reached his credit limit, suggested he take a break. But they did not. Because Carl Thomas was the kind of customer casinos dream about. A whale in full tilt, chasing losses, willing to bet anything to get even. So they kept dealing. Hand after hand after hand. By 2 a.m., Carl had signed markers totaling $50 million. He was down somewhere around $40 million for the session, a staggering loss by any measure. But not unprecedented for Carl. He had been down big before and fought his way back. He kept playing. 3 a.m., 4 a.m. The sun would be coming up soon, and Carl Thomas was still at the table. Dealers continued rotating. Pit bosses traded shifts. But Carl stayed. His eyes locked on the cards. His hands mechanically sliding chips across the felt. The markers kept coming. 70 million. 90 million. 100 million. Witnesses later reported that Carl's demeanor never changed. He did not rage, did not throw cards, did not scream at dealers. He just kept playing with the same flat expression, like a man in a trance. By 6 a.m., the sun was rising over Atlantic City, and Carl Thomas had signed markers totaling $200 million. $200 million. And he had lost it all. Every hand, every bet, every desperate attempt to recover had failed. The math had done what math always does. The 1.06% house edge had compounded over hundreds of hands until it had consumed everything. When Carl finally stood up from the table, his legs were stiff from sitting for 10 hours. The pit boss approached him professionally and courteously. They shook hands. Carl signed the final marker documentation. Then, according to multiple accounts, Carl asked a question that made everyone in the room go silent. "Can I get more credit?" The pit boss, a man who had seen everything in 30 years in the casino industry, had to take a moment before responding. Carl Thomas had just lost $200 million in a single session. He had exceeded every credit limit and every reasonable extension, and he wanted more. The answer was no. Even for a whale, there are limits. Carl Thomas left the Borgata that morning as the sun climbed higher over the Atlantic Ocean. He had just experienced the largest known gambling loss in history. A loss so big it would be reported in newspapers, analyzed by gambling experts, and studied by casino executives as an example of how far a whale could fall. But the story was not over. When the markers came due 30 days later, Carl Thomas refused to pay. 30 days after the $200 million night, the Borgata sent Carl Thomas a polite reminder. His markers were due and payment was expected. Carl's response shocked the casino industry. He refused to pay. Not because he did not have the money. Losing $200 million had certainly damaged his liquidity, but he claimed the casino had acted improperly. In April 2014, the Borgata filed a lawsuit in New Jersey Superior Court seeking to collect on the debt. The complaint laid out the night in brutal detail, including timestamps, bet amounts, and the total markers signed. It painted a picture of a man who had gambled away a fortune and now wanted to avoid the consequences. But Carl Thomas did not just refuse to pay, he countersued. His legal argument was fascinating in its audacity. Carl's lawyers claimed the Borgata had violated New Jersey gaming regulations by extending credit to a player they knew was impaired. Not intoxicated, not drugged, but impaired by gambling addiction. They argued the casino had recognized Carl was in the grip of an uncontrollable compulsion and had exploited that addiction by continuing to extend credit rather than cutting him off. Furthermore, Carl's legal team claimed the Borgata had breached its duty of care by failing to intervene when it became clear Carl was chasing losses in an irrational manner. They pointed to the progression of his bets, from $300,000 to $1 million per hand, as evidence of impaired judgment that the casino should have recognized. The argument essentially boiled down to this. The Borgata had enabled a gambling addict to destroy himself, and they should not be allowed to profit from that enabling. It was a creative legal strategy, and it raised uncomfortable questions about the whale system itself. If casinos actively court high rollers, ply them with free jets and suites, and unlimited credit, and then profit when those players lose control, are they complicit in the destruction? The Borgata's response was equally straightforward. Carl Thomas was an adult, a billionaire businessman with decades of experience making high-stakes decisions. He understood the risks of gambling. He had signed every marker voluntarily. He had never appeared intoxicated or confused. And most importantly, he had been gambling at this level for years without ever claiming impairment before. The casino argued that allowing Carl to void his markers because he lost too much would create a moral hazard. Every losing gambler could simply claim addiction after the fact and walk away from their debts. The entire credit system would collapse. The case dragged through the courts for months. Depositions, expert testimony, financial document reviews. Carl's lawyers brought in psychologists to testify about gambling addiction and its effects on judgment. The Borgata brought in surveillance footage showing Carl appearing calm and in control throughout the session. Meanwhile, the gambling industry watched nervously. Because if Carl won this case, it would fundamentally change the way casinos could extend credit to whales. Every loss could become a lawsuit. Every whale could become a liability. In February 2015, the court issued a preliminary ruling. Judge James Isman denied Carl's motion to dismiss the Borgata's lawsuit, finding that the casino had a valid claim for the debt. But the judge also allowed Carl's counterclaim to proceed, meaning the question of the casino's responsibility for enabling an addict would still be litigated. The legal battle seemed headed for a lengthy trial. But trials are expensive and unpredictable, and both sides had reasons to avoid one. The Borgata wanted its money without years of legal fees and bad publicity. Carl wanted to avoid a public trial that would expose the full extent of his gambling losses and potentially damage his business reputation. In October 2016, the parties reached a settlement. The terms were sealed, which is standard in high-stakes civil cases. But based on court filings and industry analysis, most experts believe Carl agreed to pay somewhere between $80 million and $120 million. That was far less than the $200 million he had lost, but still an astronomical sum. Both sides claimed victory. The Borgata recovered a significant portion of its money. Carl avoided paying the full amount, and he kept the settlement details private. The legal questions about casinos' responsibility for addicted whales remained unanswered. But for Carl Thomas, the settlement was just the beginning of a much longer reckoning. Losing $200 million and fighting a years-long lawsuit had not cured him of his addiction. It had not even slowed him down. Here's the thing about gambling addiction. It does not respond to consequences the way normal behavior does. Losing your house, your car, your savings, those things do not make an addict stop. They make them more desperate to win it back. Now imagine being Carl Thomas. You have just lost $200 million and fought a lawsuit for years. You have been publicly humiliated, your addiction exposed in court filings. Your business has suffered, your reputation damaged. Any rational person would never touch a casino again. Carl kept gambling. Between 2011 and 2016, while the Borgata lawsuit was ongoing, Carl continued playing at other casinos in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and Macau. The man who had just experienced the biggest gambling loss in history could not stay away from the tables. Casinos, despite knowing about the Borgata situation and the pending lawsuit, still welcomed him. Carl was still rich. His real estate empire, while damaged, had not collapsed. He could still pay his debts, even if it took settlements and lawsuits. Some casinos were more cautious. They lowered his credit limits, capped his bets, or required cash deposits up front. Others saw an opportunity. A whale in distress is still a whale. And if Carl wanted to play, they would let him play. Reports from this period describe Carl as increasingly erratic at the tables. The calm, controlled player from his early years had been replaced by someone who chased losses aggressively, who tilted when cards did not fall his way, who could not walk away from a losing session. His family tried to intervene. Friends staged informal interventions, begging Carl to stop before he destroyed everything. Business partners expressed concern that his gambling was affecting his judgment in real estate deals. Nothing worked. Gambling addiction, especially at this level, is not really about the money, it is about the feeling. The adrenaline spike when you bet $1 million and watch the cards turn over. The brief moment where anything is possible. The illusion of control in a random universe. Carl Thomas was a billionaire who had built an empire through calculated risk. But baccarat is not calculated risk. It is pure chance with a mathematical edge against you. For someone whose entire identity was built on being smarter than everyone else, on seeing opportunities others missed, the randomness was intolerable. So he kept playing, kept believing he could beat it, kept signing markers and losing, and kept signing more markers. In 2017, Carl reportedly lost another $30 million at a Las Vegas casino over a long weekend. In 2018, he was down $40 million at a Macau property during Chinese New Year. The numbers were smaller than the Borgata night, but they were still staggering. And they added up. His net worth, once estimated at over $2 billion, began to erode. Not just from gambling losses, but from the way gambling affected his business. He was distracted, making poor decisions, missing opportunities. Some of his properties were sold, reportedly to cover gambling debts. Others were leveraged heavily, taking on debt that previous Carl would have avoided. Through it all, the casinos kept dealing, kept extending credit, kept welcoming him back, kept profiting from his inability to walk away.